has cleared the tower. Every four computers now have primary control of critical vehicle functions.
Hello, everyone. Hello, folks and people. Hello, bugs and friends. Hello, 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 hello. It is a rather late evening. It's definitely later than I usually do this. But, where am I? Where am I? There I am. That's where I should be. But yeah, it's a little later than usual, but I haven't streamed in a little while. I haven't done any readings for a hot minute. And I don't know, felt like the right time. Felt like a good time for it. Also, my partner has been at work like every day for endless 12-hour shifts, and I'm very lonely. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna stream. I'm gonna do a read stream. And I'll record that, and that'll be what I do to combat my crippling loneliness. But no, real talk. Yeah, I don't know. It's just been a while, and I was like, oh, I could go for. Ow! I hit my foot. I was like, I could go for doing a read stream right now. I could go for just doing some reading. So, I picked out something from the shelf. It is Sherlock Holmes Through Time and Space. So it's like older science fiction Sherlock Holmes stories, and I'm like, that'll do. That'll work out. I just want something easy, something chill to read for a couple of hours. We might not even go for as long as usual. I typically I do some chatting and some cleanup and some thinking about, some talking about whatever I've been playing and whatnot, but I don't know if I'm in the mood. I don't know. I don't know if I want to tell y'all what I've been up to. Maybe you don't need to know. Maybe you don't need to know what video games I've been playing. Maybe you don't need to know Jack Honkin' Diddle. I will share this though, just for the funzimo gumbos of it. Partner made me a little live 2D avatar of my little Blorbo, of my little character. It's on a different computer right now. I gotta figure out how to bring it over here, and also figure out how to like make it work. But I'm thinking next time I do like a more major stream, I'm gonna bring this over and give the whole facial tracking thing a shot, because I think that'll be cool. That'd be real neat. I think that'd be cool. Where am I? There I am. The split second delay between teleporting to different rooms of my mansion, of my big mansion that's real and that I live in it. So yeah, I think I'm probably just gonna go ahead and hop onto it, because man, I just want to read. I just want to read for a while. That's it. That's all I'm here to do. I read. That's it. That's all I do. No, I do many other things. Let's see. I don't know. I was wondering. Well, now I'm wondering if I do. Maybe I do want to tell y'all what I've been reading. I did post it to my Twitter. Some stuff I was reading recently, like Dinosaur Sanctuary, which was a really fun little manga. What else? What have I been looking into lately? I picked up one called Giant Spider in Me, which feels exceedingly geared towards, like, this was targeted. this was made for the sole purpose of like targeting me. But yeah, it's just I kind of thought it would be a little more of like slice of life comedy, but it's actually more of like a cooking manga that also happens to feature like a girl and her giant pet spider. And so she just like cooks nice food, and the spider helps sometimes. And it's just nice. It's just a nice, pleasant little manga. Alternatively, though, the other one that I was reading the other night, which is just absolute absurdist body horror nonsense, is Shibuya Goldfish. And the the entire idea really is just straight up killer giant flying goldfish attack Shibuya and just eat people. They're just giant goldfish that fly around and eat people. It's very like it sounds like a Junji Ito concept, but like probably a little watered down in the horror aspect and a little bit more just like absurd. But it was alright. I read 2 volumes of it. I got the stuff at the used bookstore and I was like, okay, alright, that was fine. This is weird, but it's okay. There's like 11 volumes of it, so like part of me wants to try and find the rest of them and give that a shot because it's just, do I even have to elaborate? It's giant goldfish eating people, and I'm kind of like, well, that sounds like some stupid bullshit, and I love stupid bullshit. I picked up some more Warhammer novels because I love reading books that take place in a horrible fascist dystopian horror future where everything's bad for everyone. I've been trying to I'm like, how do I recommend anyone a Warhammer novel? I don't. Because it sucks. It's a horrible world. No one should want to go to Warhammer World. It's a painful time. It's not good for anybody. What else? No, I guess that's pretty much it. I think I've delayed reading long enough. I just got caught up in my usual routine. I wasn't gonna do it. I wasn't going to, but then I was like, nah, I think I will. But with that said, I think let's go ahead and change the category back over to reading fun. We're now reading. It's reading time. Yeah, it is now independent reading time. Nobody's allowed to interrupt into independent reading time. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I just wanna have a nice time. I wanna have a nice vibe. I just wanna have a good night. You know what I mean? So, our first story of the night: The Adventure of the Devil's Foot. And this was actually by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle himself. In recording from time to time some of the curious experiences and interesting recollections which I associate with my long and intimate friendship with Mr. Sherlock Holmes, I have continually been faced by difficulties caused by his own aversion to publicity. To his somber and cynical spirit, all popular applause was always abhorrent, and nothing amused him more at the end of a successful case than to hand over the actual exposure to some orthodox official, and to listen with a mocking smile to the general chorus of misplaced congratulation. It was indeed the attitude upon the part of my friend, and certainly not any lack of interesting material, which has caused me of late years to lay very few of my records before the public. My participation in some of his adventures was always a privilege, with entailed discretion and reticence upon me. It was, then, with considerable surprise that I received a telegram from Holmes last Tuesday. He has never been known to write where a telegram would serve, in the following terms: "Why not tell them of the Cornish horror, strangest case I have handled?" I have no idea what backward sweep of memory had brought the fresh matter to mind, or what freak had caused him to desire that I should recount it. But I hasten, before another cancelling telegram may arrive, to hunt out the notes which gave me the exact details of the case, and to lay the narrative before my readers. It was, then, in the spring of the year 1897 that Holmes' iron constitution showed some symptoms of giving way in the face of constant hard work of a most exacting kind, aggravated, perhaps, by occasional indiscretions of his own. In March of that year, Dr. Moore Agar of Harley Street, whose dramatic introduction to Holmes I may some day recount, gave positive injunctions that the famous private agent lay aside all his cases and surrender himself to complete rest if he wished to avert an absolute breakdown. The state of his health was not a matter in which he himself took the faintest interest, for his mental detachment was absolute. But he was induced, at least, on the threat of being permanently disqualified from work, to give himself a complete change of scene and air. Thus it was that in the early spring of that year we found ourselves together in a small cottage near Poldhu Bay, at the further extremity of the Cornish peninsula. It was a singular spot, and one peculiarly I can't say that word. That shouldn't be hard. Peculiarly. And one peculiarly. I feel like I've just never heard that word before said. I've heard peculiar, but for some reason I've never heard peculiarly, and it like makes my mouth get all scrunchy. It was a singular spot, and one peculiarly well suited to the grim humor of my patient. From the windows of our little whitewashed house, which stood high upon the grassy headland, we looked down upon the whole sinister semicircle of Mounts Bay, that old death-trap of sailing vessels, with its fringe of black cliffs and surge-swept reefs, on which innumerable seamen have met their end. Seamen. With a northerly breeze, it lies placid and sheltered, inviting the storm-tossed craft to tack into it for rest and protection. Then come the sudden swirl round of the wind, the blustering gale from the southwest, the dragging anchor, the lee shore, and the last battle in the creaming breakers. The creaming breakers. The new sports team name, the creaming breakers. We gotta go to Southside High. We're gonna put those creaming breakers in their place. The wise mariner stands far out from that evil place. On the land side, our surroundings were as somber as on the sea. It was a country of rolling moors, lonely and dun-colored. Dun-colored? That's me. It's me-colored. It's the me-colored rolling moors. Lonely and dun-colored, with an occasional church tower to mark the site of some old-world village. In every direction upon these moors there were traces of some vanished race which had passed utterly away, and left as its sole records strange monuments of stone, irregular mounds which contained the burned ashes of the dead, and curious earthworks which hinted at prehistoric strife. The glamour and mystery of the place, with its sinister atmosphere of forgotten nations, appealed to the imagination of my friend, and he spent much of his time in long walks and solitary meditations upon the moor. The ancient Cornish language had also arrested his attention, and he had, I remember, conceived the idea that it was akin to Chaldean, and had been largely derived from the Phoenician traders in tin. He had received a consignment. It's not cognizant, it's consignment. I can read, I promise. He received... maybe I can't. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody I can't read. He had received a consignment of books upon philology. Upon philology. Sorry, that word's making me laugh. Philology. Books on philology, and was settling down to develop his thesis when suddenly, to my sorrow and to his unfeigned delight, we found ourselves, even in that land of dreams, plunged into a problem at our very doors, which was more intense, more engrossing, and infinitely more mysterious than any of those which had driven us from London. Which had driven us. No, I read that right. I'm good at reading. I'm good at reading. I've been doing this for a few months. You all know. I lost my place. Our simple life and peaceful, healthy routine were violently interrupted, and we were precipitated into the midst of a series of events which caused the utmost excitement not only in Cornwall but throughout the whole west of England. Many of my readers may retain some recollection of what was called at the time the Cornish horror. Yo, she loves me for my Cornish horror. Though a most imperfect account of the matter reached the London press, now, after 13 years, I will give the true details of this inconceivable affair to the public. I have said that scattered towers marked the villages which dotted this part of Cornwall. The nearest of these was the hamlet of Tredannick Wallace, where the cottages of a couple of 100 inhabitants clustered round an ancient moss-grown church. The vicar of the parish, Mr. Roundhay, was something of an archaeologist, and as such Holmes had made his acquaintance. He was a middle-aged man, portly and affable, with a considerable fund of local lore. At his invitation, we had taken tea at the vicarage, and had come to know also Mr. Mortimer Tregennis. Tregennis nuts. Sorry, that was a stretch. Mr. Mortimer Tregennis, an independent gentleman, who increased the clergyman's scant resources by taking rooms in his large, straggling house. The vicar, being a bachelor, was glad to come to such an arrangement, though he had little in common with his lodger, who was a thin, dark, spectacled man, with a stoop which gave the impression of an actual physical deformity. I remember that during our short visit we found the vicar garrulous, but his lodger strangely reticent. Garrulous and reticent. I gotta look up some words. I gotta look up some words. Oh, I had not intended to, derail this too hard. Oh, whoopsie. What did I just do? What did I do? Bring that back. I was looking at that. Alright, I gotta look up garrulous. Garrulous. What does garrulous mean? Excessively talkative, especially in trivial matter. Oh, okay, so he's chatty. And then reticent, which is probably going to be like the antithesis of that. Not revealing one's... Okay, so it's the opposite. Okay. Today I learned. I remember that during our short visit, we found the vicar garrulous, but his lodger strangely reticent. A sad-faced, introspective man, sitting with his averted eyes, brooding apparently upon his own affairs. These were the two men who entered abruptly into our little sitting room on Tuesday, March the 16th, shortly after our breakfast hour, as we were smoking together, preparatory to our daily excursion upon the moors. "Mr. Holmes," said the vicar in an agitated voice, "the most extraordinary and tragic affair has occurred during the night. It is the most unheard-of business. We can only regard it as a special providence that you should chance to be here at the time, for in all England you are the one man we need." I glared at the intrusive vicar with no I glared at the intrusive vicar with no very friendly eyes, but Holmes took his pipe from his lips and sat up in his chair like an old hound who hears the view halloo. He waved his hand to the sofa, and our palpitating visitor with his agitated companion sat side by side upon it. Mr. Mortimer Tregennis was more self-contained than the clergyman, with the twitching of his thin hands and the brightness of his dark eyes showed that they shared a common emotion. "Shall I speak, or you?" he asked of the vicar. "Well, as you seem to have made the discovery, whatever it may be, and the vicar to have had it second hand, perhaps you had better do the speaking," said Holmes. I glanced at the hastily clad clergyman, with the formally dressed lodger seated beside him, and was amused at the surprise which Holmes' simple deduction had brought to their faces. Shared a common emotion. Just kiss already. Excuse me, you two. Can you two just come on? Just we can feel the romantic tension in this room. Come on, just kiss. I glanced at the hastily clad clergyman with the formally dressed lodger seated beside him, and was amused at the surprise which Holmes' simple deduction had brought to their faces. Hello, worlds of confusion. Welcome in. Perhaps I had best say a few words first, said the vicar, and then you can judge if you will listen to the details from Mr. Tregennis, or whether we should not hasten at once to the scene of this mysterious affair. I may explain, then, that our friend here spent last evening in the company of his two brothers, Owen and George, and of his sister Brenda, at their house of Trenedick, Wartha, which is near the old stone cross upon the moor. He left them shortly after 10 o'clock, playing cards round the dining-room table in excellent health and spirits. This morning, being an early riser, he walked in that direction before breakfast and was overtaken by the carriage of Dr. Richards, who explained that he had just been sent for on the most urgent call to Trenedick, Wartha. Mr. Mortimer Tregennis naturally went with him. The perfect stream for my wind down. I hope you are all well. I hope this goes well for you then. 'Cause yeah, this is just gonna be a real chill kind of Sherlock Holmes stream. It's late evening, and I was just like, you know what? I could go for just a chill vibing stream. So we're just doing some Sherlock Holmes with a little sci-fi sprinkled on it. And for you coming in, this one is called The Adventure of the Devil's Foot, and it is by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle himself. I'm here for Bug Alien. I'm gay, so can you. And welcome in, Machine It's good to see you too. Mr. Mortimer Tregennis naturally went with him. When he arrived at Trenedick, Wartha, he found an extraordinary state of things. His two brothers and his sister were seated round the table exactly as he had left them, the cards still spread in front of them, and the candles burned down to their sockets. The sister lay back, stone dead in her chair, while the two brothers sat on each side of her, laughing, shouting, and singing, the senses stricken out of them. All three of them, the dead woman and the two demented men, retained upon their faces an expression of the utmost horror, a convulsion of terror which was dreadful to look upon. There was no sign of the presence of anyone in the house, except Mrs. Porter, the old cook and housekeeper, who declared that she had slept deeply and heard no sound during the night. Nothing had been stolen or disarranged, and there is absolutely no explanation of what the horror can be which has frightened a woman to death, and two strong men out of their senses. There is the situation, Mr. Holmes, in a nutshell, and if you can help us to clear it up, you will have done a great work. I had hoped that in some way I could coax my companion back into the quiet which had been the object of our journey, but one glance at his intense face and contracted eyebrows told me how vain damn it. But one glance at his intense face and contracted eyebrows told me how vain was now the exception. He sat for some little time in silence, absorbed in the strange drama which had broken in upon our peace. "I will look into this matter," he said at last. "On the face of it, it would appear to be a case of a very exceptional nature. Have you been there yourself, Mr. Roundhay?" "No, Mr. Holmes." Mr. Tregennis brought back the account to the vicarage, and I at once hurried over with him to consult you. "How far is it to the house where this singular tragedy occurred?" "About a mile inland." "Then we shall walk over together. But before we start, I must ask you a few questions, Mr. Mortimer Tregennis." And then Holmes was like, "So you two, you're an item, right? The two of you, I can feel it. The two of you just have an energy. You came in here, you're hand in hand, you're sitting side by side. We can feel the romantic tension in here. I think the real mystery here is why neither of you are willing to confess your feelings yet. So let's get on that first." Anyway. The other had been silent all this time, but I had observed that his more controlled excitement was even greater than the obtrusive emotion of the clergyman. He sat with a pale, drawn face, his anxious gaze fixed upon Holmes, and his thin hands clasped convulsively together. His pale lips quivered as he listened to the dreadful experience which had befallen his family, and his dark eyes seemed to reflect something of the horror of the scene. "Ask what you like, Mr. Holmes," he said eagerly. "It is a bad thing to speak of, but I will answer you in truth." "Tell me about last night." "Well, Mr. Holmes, I suppose I supped there, as the vicar said, and my elder brother George proposed a game of whist afterwards. We sat down about 9 o'clock. It was 10:15 when I moved to go. I left them all round the table, as merry as could be." "Who let you out?" "Mrs. Porter had gone to bed, so I let myself out. I shut the hall door behind me. The window of the room in which they sat was closed, but the blind was not drawn. There was no change in door or window this morning, nor any reason to think that any stranger had been to the house. Yet there they sat, driven clean mad with terror, and Brenda lying dead of fright, with her head hanging over the arm of the chair. I'll never get the sight of that room out of my mind so long as I live." Whoever can confuse Sherlock first wins. You win. I'm confused. "The facts as you state them are certainly most remarkable," said Holmes. "I take it that you have no theory yourself which can in any way account for them." "It's devilish, Mr. Holmes, devilish," cried Mortimer Tregennis. "It is not of this world. Something has come into that room which has dashed the light of reason from their minds. What human contrivance could do that?" "I fear," said Holmes, "that the matter is beyond humanity. It is certainly beyond me. Yet we must exhaust all natural explanations before we fall back upon such a theory as this. As to yourself, Mr. Tregennis, I take it you were divided in some way from your family, since they lived together and you had rooms apart?" "That is so, Mr. Holmes, though the matter is past and done with. We were a family of tin miners at Red Roof. We were sold out of our venture to a company, and so retired with enough to keep us. I won't deny that there was some feeling about the division of the money, and it stood between us for a time, but it was all forgiven and forgotten, and we were the best of friends together." The ultimate win condition of any game with Sherlock Holmes. Just confuse him. If you can make Sherlock Holmes look at you and just go, "What the hell are you doing?" You win. "Looking back at the evening which you spent together, does anything stand out in your memory as throwing any possible light upon the tragedy? Think carefully, Mr. Tregennis, for any clue which can help me." "There is nothing at all, sir." "Your people were in their usual spirits?" "Never better." "Were they nervous people? Did they ever show any apprehension of coming danger?" "Nothing of the kind." "You have nothing to add, then, which could assist me?" Mortimer Tregennis considered earnestly for a moment. "There is one thing that occurs to me," he said at last. "As we sat at the table, my back was to the window, and my brother George, he being my partner at cards, was facing it. I saw him once look hard over my shoulder, so I turned round to look also. The blind was up and the window shut, but I could just make out the bushes on the lawn, and it seemed to me for a moment that I saw something moving among them. I couldn't even say if it was a man or animal, but I just thought there was something there. When I asked him what he was looking at, he told me that he had the same feeling. This is all I can say." "Did you not investigate?" "No. The matter passed as unimportant." "You left them, then, without any premonition of evil?" "None at all." "I am not clear how you came to hear the news so early this morning." "I am an early riser, and I generally take a walk before breakfast. This morning I had hardly started when the doctor in his carriage overtook me. He told me that old Mrs. Porter had sent a boy down with an urgent message. I sprang in beside him, and we drove on. When we got there, we looked into that dreadful room. The candles in the fire must have burned out hours before, and they had been sitting there in the dark until dawn had broken. The doctor said Brenda must have been dead at least 6 hours. There was no signs of violence. She just lay across the arm of the chair with that look on her face. George and Owen were singing. George and Owen were singing Communicate with You. Oh, wait, hold on. I was holding 2 pages together. I was wondering, what are you talking about? What? George and Owen were singing snatches of songs and gibbering like 2 great apes. Oh, it was awful to see. I couldn't stand it, and the doctor was as white as a sheet. Indeed, he fell into a chair in a sort of faint, and we nearly had him on our hands as well. Remarkable. Most remarkable, said Holmes, rising and taking his hat. I think perhaps we had better go down to Trinidad-Guartha without further delay. I confess that I have seldom known a case which, at first sight, presented a more singular problem. Our proceedings of that first morning did little to advance the investigation. It was marked, however, at the outset by an incident which left the most sinister impression upon my mind. The approach to the spot at which the tragedy occurred is down a narrow, winding country lane. While we made our way along it, we heard the rattle of a carriage coming towards us and stood aside to let us pass. As it drove by us, I caught a glimpse through the closed window of a horribly contorted, grinning face glaring out at us. Those staring eyes and gnashing teeth flashed past us like a dreadful vision. "My brothers!" cried Mortimer Tregennis, white to his lips. "They are taking them to Helston." We looked with horror after the black carriage, lumbering upon its way. Then we turned our steps towards this ill-omened house in which they had met their strange fate. It was a large and bright dwelling, rather a villa than a cottage, with a considerable garden which was already, in that Cornish air, well filled with spring flowers. Towards this garden the window of the sitting-room fronted, and from it, according to Mortimer Tregennis, must have come that thing of evil which had by sheer horror in a single instant blasted their minds. This evil thing, unidentified evil thing, blasted their minds. Me when I get mind blasted. Holmes walked slowly and thoughtfully among the flower pots and along the path before we entered the porch. So absorbed was he in his thoughts, I remember, that he stumbled over the watering pot, upset its contents, and deluged both our feet and the garden path. Inside the house we were met by an elderly Cornish housekeeper, Miss Porter, who, with the aid of a young girl, looked after the wants of the family. She readily answered all Holmes' questions. She had heard nothing in the night. Her employers had all been excellent spirits lately, and she had never known them more cheerful and prosperous. She had fainted with horror upon entering the room in the morning and seeing that dreadful company round the table. She had, when she recovered, thrown open the window to let the morning air in, and had run down the lane, whence she sent a farm lad for the doctor. The lady was on her bed upstairs, if we cared to see her. It took 4 strong men to get the brothers into the asylum carriage. She would not herself stay in the house another day, and was starting that very afternoon to rejoin her family in St. Ives. We ascended the stairs and viewed the body. Miss Brenda Tregennis had been a very beautiful girl, though now verging upon middle age. Her dark, clear-cut face was handsome, even in death, but there still lingered upon it something of that convulsion of horror which had been her last human emotion. From her bedroom we descended to the sitting-room, where this strange tragedy had actually occurred. The charred ashes of the overnight fire lay in the grate. On the table were the 4 guttered and burnt-out candles, with the cards scattered over its surface. The chairs had been moved back against the walls, but all else was as it had been the night before. Holmes paced with light, swift steps about the room. He sat in the various chairs, drawing them up and reconstructing their positions. He tested how much of the garden was visible. He examined the floor, the ceiling, and the fireplace. But never once did I see that sudden brightening of his eyes and tightening of his lips, which would have told me that he saw some gleam of light in this utter darkness. "Why a fire?" he asked once. Had they always a fire in this small room on a spring evening? Mortimer Tregennis explained that the night was cold and damp. For that reason, after his arrival, the fire was lit. This fire was lit. Anyway. Good joke. Everybody laugh. What are you going to do now, Mr. Holmes? He asked. My friend smiled and laid his hand upon him. I think, Watson, that I shall resume that course of tobacco poisoning which you have so often and so justly condemned, said he. With your permission, gentlemen, we will now return to our cottage, for I am not aware that any new factor is likely to come to our notice here. I will turn the facts over in my mind, Mr. Tregennis, and should anything occur to me, I will certainly communicate with you in the car. In the meantime, I wish you both good morning. Sherlock looking around the room, and he just goes like, man, I ain't found shit. Whatever. I don't know. They were poisoned or something. Let's go home. Their tobacco was no good. They got that upset tummy from the bad tobacco, the tobacco. It was not long after we were back in Poltu Cottage that Holmes. You cannot get ye flask. You cannot get ye flask. You cannot solve ye murder. I don't know why I'm doing strong bad. I feel like just something clicked in my mind, and I was like, I should remember Homestar Runner now. It was not until long after we were both I can read. It was not until long after we were back in Poltu Cottage that Holmes broke his complete and absorbed silence. He sat coiled in his armchair, his haggard and ascetic face hardly visible amid the blue swirl of his tobacco smoke. His black brows drawn down, his forehead contracted, his eyes vacant and far away. Finally, he laid down his pipe and sprang to his feet. Oh man, I love it when someone reminds me of Strong Bad. It's a good character to be reminded of. I love Strong Bad. I love Homestar Runner in general. You cannot get your flask. You cannot solve your murder. Homestar, why do you never wear pants? I do wear long pants, John. I wear long pants, John Bad. They're long pants. Long pants. Oh, great. You broke Homestar and you seriously freaked me out. Anyway. None of you know what I'm referencing. I don't know if any of you know what episode I'm referencing. I just started aimlessly quoting Strong Bad. It won't do, Watson, said he with a laugh. Let us walk along the cliffs together and search for flint arrows. We are more likely to find them than clues to this problem. To let the brain work without sufficient material is like racing an engine. It racks itself to pieces. The sea air, sunshine, and patience, Watson, all else will come. I'm fucking lost. I adored Strong Bad's email. Drog door! Burninating the countryside. Burninating the peasants. Burninating. Oh man. And there was the Stinko Man cartoons that were all anime parodies where he's just like, oh man, the last 4 bites of dirt that I ate didn't make me feel very good. Maybe the 5th one will. Oh wow, power pellet. I once made a reference to limousine and poster selfie form. Oh man, I should watch some Homestar Runner. That would do my brain some good. That would just make me feel good. All right, where was I? Now, let us calmly define our position, Watson. He continued as we skirted the cliffs together. Let us get a firm grip of the very little which we do know, so that when fresh facts arise, we may be ready to fit them in their places. I take it, in the first place, that neither of us is prepared to admit diabolical intrusions into the affairs of men. Let us begin by ruling that out entirely from our minds. Very good. There remain 3 persons who have been grievously stricken by some conscious or unconscious human agency. That is firm ground. Now, when did this occur? Evidently, assuming his narrative to be true, it was immediately after Mr. Mortimer Tregennis had left the room. That is a very important point. The presumption is that it was within a few minutes afterwards. The cards still lay upon the table. It was already past their usual hour for bed. yet they had not changed their position or pushed back their chairs. I repeat, then, that the occurrence was immediately after his departure and not later than 11 o'clock last night. Our obvious step is to check, so far as we can, that the movements of Mortimer Tregennis after he left his room. In this there is no difficulty, and they seem to be above suspicion. Knowing my methods as you do, you were, of course, conscious of the somewhat clumsy water-pot expedient by which I obtained a clearer impress of his foot that might otherwise have been possible. By the way, that line was underlined in this book, so whoever owned this book first apparently thought that was very important. Because nothing else has been underlined so far, so someone was trying to solve the mystery as they went along. The wet, sandy path took it admirably. Last night was also wet, you will remember, and it was not difficult, having obtained a sample print, to prick out his track among others and to follow his movements. He appears to have walked away swiftly in the direction of the vicarage. If then Mortimer Tregennis disappeared from the scene, and yet some outside person affected the card players, how can we reconstruct that person, and how is such an impression of horror conveyed? Miss Porter may be eliminated. She is evidently harmless. Is there any evidence that someone crept up to the garden window and in some manner produced so terrific an effect that he drove those who saw it out of their senses? The only suggestion in this direction comes from Mortimer Tregennis himself, who says that his brother spoke about some movement in the garden. That is certainly remarkable, as the night was rainy, cloudy, and dark. Anyone who had the design to alarm these people would be compelled to place his very face against the glass before he could be seen. There is a 3-foot flower border outside this window, but no indication of a footmark. It is difficult to imagine, then, how an outsider could have made so terrible an impression upon the company. Nor have we found any possible motive for so strange and elaborate an attempt. You perceive our difficulties, Watson. They are only too clear, I answered with conviction. And yet, with a little more material, we may prove that they are not insurmountable, said Holmes. I fancy that among your extensive archives, Watson, you may find some which were nearly as obscure. Meanwhile, we shall put the case aside until more accurate data are available, and devote the rest of our morning to the pursuit of Neolithic man. All right, let's put this mystery aside. I want to go look for men. Let's go look into some men, Watson. Hell yeah. I may have commented upon my friend's power of mental detachment, but never have I wondered at it more than upon that spring morning in Cornwall, when for 2 hours he discoursed upon celts, arrowheads, and shards, as lightly as if no sinister mystery were waiting for his solution. It was not until we had returned in the afternoon to our cottage that we found a visitor awaiting us, who soon brought our minds back to the matter in hand. Neither of us needed to be told who that visitor was. The huge body, the craggy and deeply seamed face with the fierce eyes and hawk-like nose, the grizzled hair which nearly brushed our cottage ceiling, the beard, golden at the fringes and white near the lips, save for the nicotine stain from his perpetual cigar. All these were as well known in London as in Africa, and could only be associated with the tremendous personality of Dr. Leon Sterndale, the great lion hunter and explorer. I don't know who that is. I don't know him. I can't be that much of a big shot if I don't know him. I know everybody. And that's true. You don't have to look it up. You can just take me at face value. Leon Sterndale, the great lion hunter and explorer... Oh, wait, I just read that line. I'm good at reading. I promise. Nobody leave. Please. Big shot! I need to play Deltarune at some point so I can understand Spamton memes and Big Shot. I don't know what that's about. I just know Big Shot is always, like, next to Spamton. We had heard of his presence in the district, and had once or twice caught sight of his tall figure upon the moorland paths. He made no advances to us, however, nor would we have dreamed of doing so to him, as it was well known that it was his love of seclusion which caused him to spend the greater part of intervals between his journeys in a small bungalow buried in the lonely wood of Beauchamp-Arras. Here, amid his books and his maps, he lived an absolutely lonely life, attending to his own simple wants and paying little apparent heed to the affairs of his neighbors. It was a surprise to me, therefore, to hear him asking Holmes in an eager voice whether he had made any advance in his reconstruction of the mysterious episode. The county police are utterly at fault, said he, but perhaps your wider experience has suggested some conceivable explanation. My only claim to being taken into your confidence is that during my many residences here I have come to know this family of Tregennis very well. Indeed, upon my Cornish mother's side, I could call them cousins, and their strange fate has naturally been a great shock to me. I may tell you that I had got as far as Plymouth upon my way to Africa, but the news reached me this morning, and I came straight back again to help with the inquiry. Holmes raised his eyebrows. Spamton is basically you having a manic attack. Okay. Alright, that statement has single-handedly sold me on playing Deltarune. I will now play the game so that I can understand this. Did you lose your boat through it? I will take the next. Dear me, that is friendship indeed. I tell you they were relatives. Quite so, cousins of your mother. Was your baggage aboard the ship? Some of it, but the main part at the hotel. I see. But surely this event could not have found its way into the Plymouth morning papers. No, sir, I had a telegram. Might I ask from whom? A shadow passed over the gaunt face of the explorer. You are very inquisitive, Mr. Holmes. It is my business. With an effort, Dr. Sterndale recovered his ruffled composure. I have no objection to telling you, he said. It was Mr. Roundhay, the vicar, who sent me the telegram which recalled me. Thank you, said Holmes. I may say in answer to your original question that I have not cleared my mind entirely on the subject of this case, but that I have every hope of reaching some conclusion. It would be premature to say more. Perhaps you would not mind telling me if your suspicions point to any particular direction? No, I can hardly answer that. Then I have wasted my time, and need not prolong my visit. The famous doctor strode out of our cottage in considerable ill humor, and within 5 minutes Holmes had followed him. I saw him no more until evening, when he returned with a slow step and a haggard face, which assured me that he had made no great progress with his investigation. He glanced at a telegram which awaited him and threw it into the grate. From the Plymouth Hotel, Watson, he said. I learned the name of it from the vicar, and I wired to make and then I wired, and then I solved the whole mystery by myself. It was alien. Anyway. Where was I? From the Plymouth Hotel, Watson, he said. I learned the name of it from the vicar, and I wired to make certain that Dr. Leon Sterndale's account was true. It appears that he did indeed spend last night there, and that he was actually allowed some of his baggage to go to Africa, while he returned to be at present in this investigation. What do you make of that, Watson? He is deeply interested. Deeply interested, yes. There is a thread here which we have not yet grasped, and which might lead us through the tangle. Cheer up, Watson, for I am very sure that our material has not yet all come to hand. When it does, we may soon leave our difficulties behind us. Little did I think of how soon the words of Holmes would be realized, or how strange and sinister would be that new development which opened up an entirely fresh line of investigation. I was shaving at my window in the morning when I heard the rattle of the roofs, and, looking up, saw a dog-cart coming at the gallop down the road. It pulled up to our door, and our friend, the vicar, sprang from it and rushed up to our garden path. Holmes was already dressed, as we hastened down to meet him. He was shaving at the window. Yeah, I was just about to say, like, you're just shaving casually at the window. Was Watson just, like, hanging out at the window, just flexing, just absolute bear mode at the window, shirt off, shaving his face, just trying to, like, put on a show for whatever woodland animals were out there watching, because Lord knows how close they are to any kind of actual civilization. Seducing Bigfoot. Bigfoot is real, and he watched me shave. He watched me shave seductively at my window. Our visitor was so excited that he could hardly articulate, but at last, in gasps and bursts, his tragic story came out of him. "We are devil-ridden, Mr. Holmes. My poor parish is devil-ridden," he cried. "Satan himself is loose in it. I asked him on a date, and he said no. You have to do something about this. Satan himself is loose in it. We are given over into his hands." He danced about in his agitation, and a ludicrous object if we were not if a ludicrous object if it not were a ludicrous object if it were not for his ashy face and startled eyes. Finally he shot out his terrible news. "Mr. Mortimer Tegenis died during the night, and with exactly the same symptoms as the rest of his family." Holmes sprang to his feet, all energy in an instant. "Can you fit us both into your dog-cart?" "Yes, I can." "Then, Watson, we will postpone our breakfast. Mr. Roundhay, we are entirely at your disposal. Hurry, hurry, before things get disarranged." Also, when they say dog cart, I'm immediately thinking of like a stagecoach, but it's being pulled by like a handful of dogs, which seems a little weird. Carbon monoxide poisoning. That'd kind of be interesting. That would be like if this book was not titled Sherlock Holmes Through Time and Space, then I would actually like think this was going that direction, where it would be like everyone thinks it's something supernatural, and then Holmes will be like, "Oh, there's a gas vein coming out of the ground, and it's filling the room with crazy people gas." That's the technical term. Crazy people gas. It's the gas that makes people crazy. The lodger occupied 2 rooms at the vicarage, which were in an angle by themselves, the one above the other. Below was a large sitting room, above his bedroom. They looked out upon the croquet lawn which had come up to the windows. We had arrived before the doctor or the police, so that everything was absolutely undisturbed. Let me describe exactly the scene as we saw it upon that misty March morning. It has left an impression which can never be effaced from my mind. I prefer the gas that turns you inside out. Well, hey, if the Simpsons taught me anything, then you'll be fine. you just have your insides on the outside and everything's totally cool. And then you do a musical number. The atmosphere of the room was of horrible and depressing stuffiness. The servant who had first entered had thrown up the window, or it would have been even more intolerable. This might partly be due to the fact that a lamp stood flaring and smoking on the center table. Beside it sat the dead man, leaning back in his chair, his thin beard projecting, his spectacles pushed up onto his forehead, and his lean, dark face turned towards the window, and twisted into the same distortion of terror which had marked the features of his dead sister. His limbs were convulsed, and his fingers contorted as though he had died in a very paroxysm of fear. He was fully clothed, though there were signs that his dressing had been done in a hurry. We had already learned that his bed had been slept in, and that the tragic end had come to him in the early morning. One realized the red-hot energy which underlay Holmes' phlegmatic exterior when one saw the sudden change which came over him from the moment that he had entered the fatal apartment. In an instant he was tense and alert, his eyes shining, his face set, his limbs quivering with eager activity. He was out on the lawn. He was out on the lawn. You see that, Mr. Holmes? Hey, he's out on the lawn. Hey, Ma! Hey, Ma, there's a Sherlock Holmes outside. I don't want to start a fight with Lucy. It looks like Grandma, the fucking thing. He was out on the lawn, in through the window, round the room, and up to the bedroom, for all the world like a dashing foxhound drawing a cover. In the bedroom, he made a rapid cast around and ended by throwing open the window, which appeared to give him some fresh cause for excitement. For he leaned out of it, and with loud... Oh, this is an old-timey word that means something else now, but it's not racist. It's at least funny. Which appeared to give him some fresh cause for excitement, for he leaned out of it, and with loud ejaculations of interest and delight. First Bigfoot was watching Watson shave at his window, and now he's watching Holmes' loud ejaculations of interest and delight. Oh, I am a child. Or probably more like a teenager, really. Then he rushed down the stair, out through the open window, threw himself upon his face on the lawn, sprang up, and into the room once more, all with the energy of a hunter who is at the heels of his quarry. The lamp, which was an ordinary standard, he examined with minute care, making certain measurements upon its bowl. He carefully scrutinized with his lens the talc shield which covered the top of the chimney, and scraped off some ashes which adhered to its upper surface, putting some of them into an envelope, which he placed in his pocketbook. Finally, just as the doctor and the official police put in an appearance, he beckoned to the vicar, and we all three went upon the lawn. Oh man, yeah, there's quite a few of those in Sherlock books. you just you just start reading a Sherlock novel, and it's just like, and then he masturbated his way to across town, and you're just like, what? Wait. I am glad to say that my investigation has not been entirely barren, he remarked. I cannot remain to discuss the matter with the police, but I should be exceedingly obliged, Mr. Roudhay, if you would give the inspector my compliments and direct his attention to the bedroom window and to the sitting-room lamp. Each is suggestive, and together they are almost conclusive. If the police would desire further information, I shall be happy to see any of them at the cottage. And now, Watson, I think that perhaps we shall be better employed elsewhere. In this episode, Holmes figures it out and then walks out and says, I'm not going to tell any of you anything. Here's a hint. You guys figure it out. But, if you fuck it up, come find me. Which could also mean he doesn't know anything. And he's just like, you figure it out. You guys do it. You guys do it and then come back. It may be that the police resented the intrusion of an amateur, or that they imagined themselves to be upon some hopeful line of investigation, but it is certain that we heard nothing from them in the next 2 days. During this time, Holmes spent some of his time smoking and dreaming in the cottage, but a greater portion in country walks which he undertook alone, returning after many hours without remark as to where he had been. One experiment served to show me the line of his investigation. He had bought a lamp, which was the duplicate of the one which had burned in the room of Mortimer Tregennis on the morning of the tragedy. Wait, I skipped a page again. Hold on. This he filled with the same oil that he used at the vicarage, and he carefully timed the period which it would take to be exhausted. Another experiment which he made was more of an unpleasant nature, and one I am not likely to ever forget. You will remember, Watson, he remarked one afternoon, that there is a single common point of resemblance in the varying reports which have reached us. This concerns the effect of the atmosphere of the room in each case upon those who had first entered it. You will recollect that Mortimer Tregennis, in describing the episode of his last visit to his brother's house, remarked that the doctor on entering the room fell into a chair. You had forgotten? Well, I can answer for it that it was so. Now you will remember that Miss Porter, the housekeeper, told us that she herself fainted upon entering the room, and had afterwards opened the window. In the second case, that of Mortimer Tregennis himself, you cannot have forgotten the horrible stuffiness of the room when we arrived, though the servant had thrown open the window. That servant, I found upon inquiry, was so ill that she had gone to her bed. You will admit, Watson, that these facts are very suggestive. In each case, there is evidence of a poisonous atmosphere. In each case, also, there is combustion going on in the room, and in one case a fire, in the other a lamp. The fire was needed, but the lamp was lit, and a comparison of the oil consumed will show, long after it was broad daylight. Why? Surely because there is some connection between these three things: the burning, the stuffy atmosphere, and finally, the madness or death of those unfortunate people. That is clear, is it not? It would appear so. At least we may accept it as a working hypothesis. We will suppose, then, that something was burned in each case, which produced an atmosphere causing strange toxic effects. Very good. That's good. That's good. That's good that they burn toxic things. That's very good. In the first instance, that of the Tregennis family, this substance was placed in the fire. Now the window was shut, but the fire would naturally carry fumes to some extent up the chimney. Hence, one would expect the effects of the poison to be less than in the second case, where there was less escape for the vapor. The results seemed to indicate that it was so, since the first case, only the woman, who had presumably the more sensitive organ... Wait. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What are you trying to say? You trying to say the woman is the more sensitive organism? What are you trying to say? What are you trying to say? What are you trying to say about that? What are you trying to say about that? What are you trying to say about that? That's not cool. You can't say that kind of shit. You don't know that. You don't know. Anyway. Who had presumably the more sensitive organism was killed, the others exhibiting that temporary or permanent lunacy, which is evidently the first effect of the drug. In the second case, the result was complete. The facts, therefore, seem to bear out the theory of a poison which worked its way by combustion. And yeah, Machine Elves is like, once again, Machine Elves keeps predicting things that are very, very plausible. With this train of reasoning in my head, I naturally looked about in Mortimer Tregennis's room to find some remains of this substance. The obvious place to look was the talc shield, or the smoke guard of the lamp. There, sure enough, I perceived a number of flaky ashes, and round the edges a fringe of brownish powder, which had not yet been consumed. Half of this I took, as you saw, and placed it in an envelope. Why half, Holmes? It is not for me, my dear Watson, to stand in the way of the official police force. I leave them all the evidence which I found. The poison still remained upon the talc, had they the wit to find it. Now, Watson, we will light our lamp. We will, however, take the precaution to open our window to avoid the premature decease of two deserving members of society, and you will seat yourself near that open window in an armchair, unless, like a sensible man, you determine to have nothing to do with the affair. Oh, you will see it out, will you? I thought I knew my Watson. What, Watson, will you please risk your life for me? Watson, could you just have a little seat right there? I'm gonna burn some stuff that, might be crazy people gas, and I just need you to sit there and just take a big ol' honkin' snort of it. I just need you to take a big ol' honkin' snort of it. I don't know where this voice started and now where it's going, but now it's like, hey, Watson, could you just hang out right there? Could you hang out and just fucking take a big ol' of this crazy gas? Okay, thank you. Watson, does this smell like ethyl mercury to you? What's that one drug I keep seeing memed on where it's like, Watson, does this smell like fentanyl or ketamine? I don't know. I don't know drugs. I'm lame. Anyway. Where were we? Here we go. Wait a minute. Oh, yeah, there we go. I thought I knew my Watson. This chair will place opposite to yours, so that we may be the same distance from the poison and face to face. The door we will leave ajar. Each is now in a position to watch the other, and to bring the experiment to an end should the symptoms seem alarming. Is that all clear? Well then, I take our powder, or what remains of it, from the envelope, and I lay it upon the burning lamp, so. Now, Watson, let us sit down and await developments. They were not long in coming. I had hardly settled in my chair before I was conscious of a thick, musky odor, subtle and nauseous. Of a musky odor. It smelled like a furry convention. And not like a good one of the weird ones. At the very first whiff of it, my brain and my imagination were beyond all control. A thick, black cloud swirled before my eyes, and my mind told me that in this cloud, unseen as yet, but about to spring out upon my appalled senses, lurked all that was vaguely horrible, all that was monstrous, and lurked inconceivably in, all that wait, I goofed it. I fucking goofed it. I read like 3 different lines. A thick black cloud swirled before my eyes, and my mind told me that in this cloud, unseen as yet, but about to spring out upon my appalled senses, lurked all that was vaguely horrible, all that was monstrous and inconceivably wicked in the universe. Vague shapes swirled and swam amid the dark cloud bank, each a menace and warning of something coming, the advent of some unspeakable dweller upon the threshold, whose very shadow would blast my soul. Oh, my soul's being blasted. Oh, my soul. Oh, my God. Oh, blasting my soul. I'll take a hit of that. Yeah, exactly. Like, damn, what you smoking? Yo, quit hogging it. Yo, let me get a little bit of that. Let me get a little bit of that. Yo, this is called Soul Blast. It'll take you to another dimension. A freezing horror took possession of me. I felt that my hair was rising, and that my eyes were protruding, that my mouth was opened, and my tongue like leather. It's ego death, yo. The turmoil within my brain was such that something must surely snap. I tried to scream and was vaguely aware of some hoarse croak which was my own voice, but distant and detached from myself. At the same moment, in some effort of escape, I broke through that cloud of despair and had a glimpse of Holmes's face, white, rigid, and drawn with horror, the very look which I had seen upon the features of the dead. It was that vision which gave me an instant of sanity and of strength. I dashed from my chair, threw my arms around Holmes, and together we lurched through the door, and an instant afterwards had thrown ourselves down upon the grass plot and were lying side by side, conscious only of the glorious sunshine which was bursting its way through the hellish cloud of terror which had girt us in. Damn. Yo, I don't know, that sounds pretty intimate. Sounds like a very, just hanging out on the grass, just you and me laying in the grass, having escaped the horrible crazy people gas, and sometimes just the heart desires things in the heat of the moment, and anyway. Slowly it rose from our souls like the mist from a landscape until peace and reason had returned, and we were sitting upon the grass, wiping our clammy foreheads and looking with apprehension at each other to mark the last traces of that terrific experience which we had undergone. "Upon my word, Watson," said Holmes at last with an unsteady voice, "that shit was banging. Holy shit. That was oof. All right, maybe we take it down to a quarter next time. I owe you both my thanks and an apology. It was an unjustifiable experiment even for oneself, and doubly so for a friend. I am really very sorry." That chair cush on. "You know," I answered with some emotion, for I had never seen so much of Holmes's heart before, "that is my greatest joy and privilege to help you." He relapsed at once into the half-humorous, half-cynical vein, which was his habitual attitude to those about him. It would be superfluous, damn it, superfluous to drive us mad, my dear Watson," said he. "A candid observer would certainly declare that we were so already before we embarked upon such a wild experiment. I confess that I never imagined that the effect could be so sudden and so severe." He dashed into the cottage, and, reappearing with the burning lamp held at full arm's length, he threw it among a bank of brambles. "We must give the room little time to clear, I take it, Watson, that you have no longer a shadow of a doubt as to how these tragedies were produced." Superfluous. Okay, thank you. I'm just imagining Sherlock. He's holding this lamp out at arm's length and just going holding his breath and just being like, and then he just spikes it on the ground. He's just I wonder if I can find can I find the GIF that I'm thinking of? No. Oh crap. Oh no, I didn't want to open that. No. No, that's not what I wanted to open. I don't want to open VTube Studio. I don't know how to use it. No, go away. I don't know how to use VTube Studio. Go away. Batman bomb. There we go. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, but wait. I'm possibly afraid of the copyright problem if it becomes an issue. So let me see if I can find a GIF. Just this super. Okay, that'll do. This super crunchy crunch. Oh wait, that's not what I wanted. Can I get that one? There we go. No, I don't want to click that. Just Sherlock running around with this horrible, crazy gas lamp. Oh wait, no, I don't want to open Steam. No, no, I don't want to open Steam. I was trying to open the other thing. I was trying to do the other thing. He was getting gaslit. He sure as hell was. He was getting super gaslit. Anyway. Half cynical nature, so severe, dashed out of the cottage, threw the thing on the ground. Yo, you know that this is the shit that did that shit though, and then Watson was like, hell yeah, that's pretty good evidence right there. That was freaky. But the cause remains as obscure as before. Come into the arbor here, and let us discuss it together. That villainous stuff seems to still linger round my throat. I think we must admit that all evidence points to this man, Mortimer Tregennis, having been the criminal in the first tragedy, though he was the victim in the second one. We must remember in the first place that there is some story of a family quarrel followed by a reconciliation. How bitter that quarrel may have been, or how hollow the reconciliation, we cannot tell. When I think of Mortimer Tregennis, with the foxy face and the small, shrewd, beady eyes behind the spectacles, he is not a man whom I should judge to be of particularly forgiving disposition. Well, in the next place, you will remember that this idea of someone moving in the garden, which took our attention for a moment from the real cause of the tragedy, emanated from him. He had a motive in misleading us. Finally, if he did not throw this substance into the fire at the moment of leaving the room, who did so? The affair happened immediately after his departure. Had anyone else come in? The family would certainly have risen from the table. Besides, in peaceful Cornwall, visitors do not arrive at 10 o'clock at night. We may take it, then, that all evidence points to Mortimer Tregennis as the culprit. Then his own death was a suicide. Well, Watson, it is on the face of it a not impossible supposition. The man who had the guilt upon his soul of having brought such a fate upon his own family might well be driven by remorse to inflict it upon himself. There are, however, some cogent reasons against it. Fortunately, there is one man in England who knows all about it, and I have made arrangements by which we shall hear the facts this afternoon from his own lips. Ah, he is a little before his time. Perhaps you would kindly step this way, Dr. Leon Sterndale. We have been conducting a chemical experiment indoors which has left our room a little hardly fit for the reception of so distinguished a visitor. Sherlock, you just started giving Watson the description of what you just did, and then immediately started describing the situation that happens, like, after it. He was like, we're going to meet with someone who's going to tell us all about it. Oh, he's here. Now come inside, Mr. Sir. And it's like, wait. Hold on a minute. I had heard the click of the garden gate, and now the majestic figure of the great African explorer appeared upon the path. He turned in some surprise towards the rustic arbor in which we sat. You sent for me, Mr. Holmes. I had your note about an hour ago, and I have come. Though I really do not know why I should obey your summons. Paid by the word episodes. Perhaps we can clear the point up before we separate, said Holmes. Meanwhile, I am much obliged to you for your courteous acquiescence. You will excuse this informal reception in the open air, but my friend Watson and I have nearly furnished an additional chapter to what the papers call the Cornish horror, and we prefer a clear atmosphere for the present. Perhaps since the matters which we have to discuss will affect you personally in a very intimate fashion, it is as well we should talk here where there will be no eavesdropping. The explorer took his cigar from his lips and gazed sternly at my companion. I am at a loss to know, sir, he said, what you can have to speak about which affects me personally in a very intimate fashion. The killing of Mortimer Tregennis, said Holmes. For a moment I wished that I were armed. Sterndale's fierce face turned to a dusky red. His eyes glared, and the knotted, passionate veins started out in his forehead, while he sprang forward with clenched hands towards my companion. Then he stopped, and with a violent effort he resumed a cold, rigid calmness, which was perhaps more suggestive of danger than his hot-headed outburst. I have lived so long among... Oh, you can't say that. I have lived so long among savages and beyond the law, said he. You can't say that. You can't call him that. That I have got into the way of being a law to myself. You would do well, Mr. Holmes, not to forget it, for I have no desire to do you an injury. Nor have I any desire to do you an injury, Dr. Sterndale. Surely the clearest proof of it is that, knowing what I know, I have sent for you and not the police. Sterndale sat down with a gasp, overawed for, perhaps, the first time in his adventurous life. There was a calm assurance of power in Holmes's manner which could not be withstood. Our visitor stammered for a moment, his great hands opening and shutting in his agitation. What do you mean? He asked at last. If this is bluff upon your part, Mr. Holmes, you have chosen a bad man for your experiment. Let us have no more beating around the bush. What do you mean? I'm sorry, clearing my throat. My throat was itchy. I'm sorry. I will tell you, said Holmes, and the reason why I tell you is that I hope frankness may beget frankness. What my next step may be will depend entirely upon the nature of your own defense. My defense? Yes, sir. My defense against what? Against the charge of killing Mortimer Tregennis. Sterndale mopped his forehead with his handkerchief. Upon my word, you are getting on, said he. Do all your successes depend upon this prodigious power of bluff? The bluff, said Holmes sternly, is on your side, Dr. Leon Sterndale, not upon mine. As proof, I will tell you some of the facts upon which my conclusions are based. Of your return from Plymouth, allowing much of your property to go on to Africa, I will say nothing save that it first informed me that you were one of the factors which had to be taken into account in reconstructing this drama. I came back. I have heard your reasons and regard them as unconvincing and inadequate. We will pass that. You came down here to ask me whom I suspected. I refused to answer you. You then went to the vicarage, waited outside it for some time, and finally returned to your cottage. How do you know that? I followed you. I saw no one. That is what you may expect to see when I follow you. You spent a restless night at your cottage, and you formed certain plans, which in early morning you proceeded to put into execution. Leaving your door just as day was breaking, you filled your pocket with some reddish gravel that was lying heaped beside your gate. Sterndale gave a violent start and looked at Holmes in amazement. You then walked swiftly for a mile, which separated you from the vicarage. You were wearing, I may remark, the same pair of ribbed tennis shoes which are at the present moment upon your feet. At the vicarage you passed through the orchard and the side hedge, coming out under the window of the lodger Tregennis. It was now daylight, but the household was not yet stirring. You drew some of the gravel from your pocket, and you threw it up at the window above you. Sterndale sprang to his feet. I believe that you are the devil himself, he cried. Holmes smiled at the compliment. It took 2 or possibly 3 handfuls before the lodger came to the window. You beckoned him to come down. He dressed hurriedly and decidedly to his sitting room. You entered by the window. There was an interview, a short one, during which you walked up and down the room. Then you passed out and closed the window. Then you passed out? Like passed out or passed like out of the room? Then you passed out and closed the window, standing on the lawn outside, smoking a cigar and watching what occurred. Finally, after the death of Tregennis, you withdrew as you had come. Now, Dr. Sterndale, how do you justify such conduct? And what were the motives for your actions? If you prevaricate or trifle with me, I give you my assurance that the matter will pass out of my hands forever. Our visitor's face had turned ashen gray as he listened to the words of his accuser. Now he sat for some time in thought, with his face sunk in his hands. Then, with his sudden impulse gesture, he plucked a photograph from his breast pocket and threw it on the rustic table before us. "That is why I have done it," said he. It showed the bust and face of a very beautiful woman. Holmes stooped over it. "Brenda Tregennis," said he. "Yes, Brenda Tregennis. Oh, yes, Brenda Tregennis," repeated our visitor. "For years I have loved her. For years she has loved me. There is the secret of that Cornish seclusion which people have marveled at. It has brought me close to the one thing on earth that was dear to me. I could not marry her, for I have a wife who has left me for years, and yet whom, by the deplorable laws of England, I could not divorce. For years Brenda waited, for years I waited, and this is what we have waited for." A terrible sob shook his great frame, and he clutched his throat under his brindled beard. Then, with an effort, he mastered himself and spoke on. "The vicar knew. He was in our confidence. He would tell you that she was an angel upon earth. That was why he telegraphed to me and I returned. What was my baggage or Africa to me when I learned that such a fate had befallen my darling? There you have the missing clue to my action, Mr. Holmes." "Proceed," said my friend. Sorry, I was checking the stream quality real quick. Dr. Sterndale drew from his pocket a paper packet and laid it upon the table. On the outside was written, "Radi pedi diaboli." I don't know if that's supposed to be read in any kind of like funky way. Proceed. Proceed. I think my Discord just came up with a message from a friend. Let me check that real quick. Someone is doing things. Oh, never mind. I don't even think it was for me. Anyway, whatever. Let's get back to it. Bark, 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 bark. All right, so our hunter man came back home real soon because he heard his lover got the big dead, and he was like, "I gotta get home." "Proceed," said my friend. Dr. Sterndale drew from his pocket oh yeah, and then we read these funny words. A packet, and it was like Radix pedis diaboli. Radi petit diaboli, with a red poison label beneath it. He pushed it towards me. "I understand that you are a doctor, sir. Have you ever heard of this preparation?" "Devil's foot root? No, I have never heard of it." "It is no reflection upon your professional knowledge," said he, "for I believe that save for one sample in a laboratory in Buda, there is no other specimen in Europe. It has not yet found its way either into the pharmacopoeia or into the literature of toxicology. The root is shaped like a foot, half human, half goat-like, hence the fanciful name given by a botanical missionary. It is used as an ordeal poison by the medicine men in certain districts of West Africa, and is kept as a secret among them. This particular specimen I obtained under very extraordinary circumstances in the Abangi country." He opened the paper as he spoke and disclosed a heap of reddish-brown, snuff-like powder. "Well, sir?" asked Holmes sternly. "I am about to tell you, Mr. Holmes, all that actually occurred, for you already know so much that it is clearly to my interest that you should know it all. I have already explained the relationship in which I stood to the Tregennis family. For the sake of the sister, I was friendly with the brothers. There was a family quarrel about money, which estranged this man Mortimer, but it was supposed to be made up, and I afterwards met him as I did the others. He was sly, subtle, and scheming man, and several things arose which gave me suspicion of him, but I had no cause for any positive quarrel. One day, only a couple of weeks ago, he came down to my cottage, and I showed him some of my African curiosities. Among other things, I exhibited this powder, and told him of its strange properties, how it stimulates those brain centers which control the emotion of fear, and how either madness or death is the fate of the unhappy native, who is subjected to the ordeal by the priest of his tribe. I told him how powerless European science would be to detect it. How he took it I cannot say, for I never left the room, but there is no doubt that it was then, while I was opening cabinets and stooping to boxes, that he managed to abstract some of the devil's foot root. I well remember how he plied me with questions as to the amount and the time that was needed for its effect, but I little dreamed that he could have a personal reason for asking. I thought no more of the matter until the vicar's telegram reached me at Plymouth. This villain had thought that I would be at sea before the news could reach me, and that I should be lost for years in Africa, but I returned at once. Of course, I could not listen to the details without feeling assured that my poison had been used. I came round to see you on the chance that some other explanation had suggested itself to you, but there could be none. I was convinced that Mortimer Tregennis was the murderer, that for the sake of money, and with the idea perhaps that if the other members of his family were all insane, he would be the sole guardian of their joint property. He had used the devil's foot-root powder upon them, driven 2 of them out of their senses, and killed his sister Brenda, the one human being whom I ever have loved and who has ever loved me. There was his crime. What was to be his punishment? Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. How do I use the fatal death murder poison? Can you show me? No reason. You know, it's just for reference. It's just so that I don't accidentally use it. You know what I mean? Now I have told you all. You have yourself supplied the rest. I did as you say after a restless night, set off early from my cottage. I foresaw the difficulty of arousing him, so I gathered some gravel from the pile which you have mentioned, and I used it to throw up to his window. He came down and admitted me through the window of his sitting room. I laid his offence before him. I told him that I had come both as judge and executioner. The wretch sank into a chair, paralyzed at the sight of my revolver. I lit the lamp, put the powder above it, and stood outside the window, ready to carry out my threat to shoot him should he try to leave the room. In 5 minutes, he died. My God, how he died! But my heart was flint, for he endured nothing which my innocent darling had not felt before him. There is my story, Mr. Holmes. Perhaps, if you loved a woman, you would have done as much yourself. At any rate, I am in your hands. You can take what steps you like. As I have already said, there is no man living who can fear death less than I do. Holmes sat some little time in silence. What were your plans? He asked at last. I had intended to bury myself in Central Africa. My work there is but half finished. Go and do the other half, said Holmes. I, at least, am not prepared to prevent you. Dr. Sterndale raised his giant figure, bowed gravely, and walked from the harbor. Holmes lit his pipe and handed me his pouch. Some fumes which are not poisonous would be a welcome change, said he. I think you must agree, Watson, that it is not a case in which we are called upon to interfere. Our investigation has been independent, and our action shall be so also. You would not denounce that man? Certainly not, I answered. I have never loved, Watson, but if I did, and if the woman I loved had met such an end, I might act even as our lawless lion hunter has done. Who knows? Well, Watson, I will not offend your intelligence. And then Watson's like, okay, wait, Holmes, what if someone killed me? If someone killed me, would you take horrible revenge? What about me? And then you get like, it's like a fan fiction. We just get like Holmes blushing. He's like, oh, I don't know, maybe. We'll see. If you ever get murdered, we'll find out. Anyway. It was unlike anything. What was it? Holmes does the nya pose. Watson, you know, like nya. It's kitty, dear Watson. Who knows? Well, Watson, I will not offend your intelligence by explaining what's obvious. The gravel upon the windowsill was, of course, the starting point of my research. It was unlike anything in the vicarage garden. Only when my attention had been drawn to Dr. Sterndale and his cottage did I find its counterpart. The lamp shining in broad daylight and the remains of powder upon the shield were successive links in a fairly obvious plan. And now, my dear Watson, I think we may dismiss the matter from our mind, and go back with a clear conscience to study of those Chaldean roots which are surely to be traced in Cornish branch of the great Celtic speech. That was The Adventure of the Devil's Foot. That was The Adventure of the Devil's Stinky Foot. How long have we been going for? Only about an hour and a half. I think the next story is fairly short. I can probably do one more, but before I do that, I'm gonna go grab a little bit of a snack, but I'm not gonna mute the microphone because I'm walking like 2 feet away. You're gonna listen to me get up and get snacks. That's what's gonna happen. You're gonna listen to me get my water and set it down, as well as open my dried mango treats. This is what happens. This is what's happening. It's an eating stream now. This smells very strong. Is your water sharp or dull? You know what? I just got it from the tap, so it is dull. It is not in fact sharp. Because it's not cold. Dunny eats dried fruit. ASMR. I should make like a little thing that says like snack time, and I just put it on the screen. So how y'all doing? How y'all doing? Can we say spooky on that note? There you go. Meow, 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 meow. I am surprised that she has not interrupted me. I think it's because I started later. I'm starting to realize that whenever I usually stream, it's just the time of day that Spooky's awake. I really like dried mango because my favorite snack is chewing on shoe leather that has sugar on it. Okay. It's called fruit leather. Okay, now a couple of little mini cookies to top that off, and then we'll be ready to go. I guess I need to make like a little. I need to make a little sign that says like it's snack time. Okay, there we go. I have now had a snack. My throat is now properly lubricated for reading. Reading such big, intimidating words. Actually, I'm gonna have a little more water and then I'll. My favorite part of the stream was when Dunny just started eating and didn't say anything. I like the part where Dunny just started eating dried fruit and cookies on stream and didn't stop. He just kept on eating stuff. So, the next thing that... Let's see, the next story... This one is set up a little strangely. We'll see what we can do. This is a weird podcast. All right, so this is The Problem of the Sore Bridge, Among Others, by Harry Manders. Harry Mander. Oh, man, he's a hairy mander. What a hairy man. The Boer bullet that pierced my thigh in 1900 lamed me for the rest of my life, but I was quite able to cope with its effects. However, at the age of 61, I suddenly find that a killer that has felled far more men than bullets has lodged within me. The doctor, my kinsman, gives me 6 months at the most. 6 months, which he frankly says will be very painful. He knows of my crimes, of course, and it may be that he thinks my suffering will be poetic justice. I'm not sure, but I'll swear that this is the meaning of that slight smile which accompanied his declaration of my doom. Be that as it may, I have little time left, but I have determined to write down that adventure of which Raffles and I swore we would never breathe a word. It happened. It really happened, but the world would not have believed it then. They would have been convinced that I was a liar or insane. I am writing this, nevertheless, because 50 years from now, the world may have progressed to a stage where such things as I tell are of our... I am writing this, nevertheless, because 50 years from now, the world may have progressed to the stage where such things as I can tell of are credible. Man may even have landed on the moon by then, if he has perfected a propeller which works in the ether as well as the air. Or if he discovers the same sort of drive that brought... Well, I anticipate. I hope this is an alien story. Let's get some aliens. I must hope that the world of 1974... I must hope that the world of 1974 will believe this adventure. Then the world will know that whatever crimes Raffles and I committed, we paid for them 1,000-fold by what we did that week in May of 1895. And in fact, the world is and always will be immeasurably in our debt. Yes, my dear doctor, my scornful kinsman, whose hopes that I will suffer pain and punishment, I long ago paid off my debt. I only wish that you could be alive to read these words, and who knows, you may live to be 100 and may read this account of what you owe me. I hope so. I was nodding in my chair in my room at Mount Street, when the clanging of the lift gates in the yard startled me. A moment later, a familiar tattoo sounded on my door. I opened it to find, as I expect... That was a weird way to describe that. A familiar tattoo sounded on my door. I'm wondering if they're trying to write out an onomatopoeia. As I expected, A.J. Raffles himself. He slipped in, his bright blue eyes merry as he removed his Sullivan from his lips to point with it at my whiskey and soda. Bored, Bunny? Rather, I replied. It's been almost a year since we stirred our stumps. The voyage around the world after the Levy affair was stimulating, but that ended 4 months ago, and since then... Ennui and bile, Raffles cried. Well, Bunny, that's all over. Tonight we make the blood run hot and cold and burn up all green biliousness. And the swag? And the swag, I said. Jewels, Bunny, to be exact. Star sapphires and blue corundum, cut en cabochon, that is, round with a flat underside, and large, Bunny, vulgarly large, almost the size of a hen's egg, if my informant was not exaggerating. There's a mystery about them, Bunny, a mystery my fence has been whispering with his cockney speech into my ear for some time. They're dispensed by Mr. James Phillimore of Kensal Rise, but where he gets them, from who he lifts them, no one knows. My fence has hinted that they may not come from manorial strongboxes or milady's throat, but are smuggled from Southeast Asia or South Africa or Brazil, directly from the mine. In any event, we are going to do some reconnoitering tonight, and if the opportunity should arise... Boy, this one's weird in comparison. Our main character's name is Bunny. His friend's name is Raffles. They're both thieves, I guess. They're talking about swag. Excuse? Whoa. I keep hearing it as Dunny. It's me. I'm in the story now. I am now this man. Come now, AJ, I said bitterly. You have done all the needed reconnoitering. Be honest. Tonight, we suddenly find that the moment is prosperous and we strike, right? I had always been somewhat piqued that Raffles chose to do all the preliminary work, the casing, as the underworld says himself. For some reason, he did not trust me to scout the layout. Raffles blew a huge and perfect smoke ring from his Sullivan, and he clapped me on the shoulder. You see through me, Bunny. Yes, I have examined the grounds and checked out Mr. Phillimore's schedule. This dude vapes. This is the tonal whiplash here from the other story. But this is written by a different guy, so... I was unable to say anything to the most masterful man I have ever met. I meekly donned dark clothes, downed the rest of the whiskey, and left with Raffles. We strolled for some distance, making sure that no policemen were shadowing us, though we had no reason to believe they would be. We then took the last train to Willesden at 11:21. On my way, I said, "Does Phillimore live near an old Baird's house?" I was referring to the moneylender killed by Jack Rudder, the details of which case are written in Willful Murder. As a matter of fact, Raffles said, watching me with his keen steel-gray eyes, it's the same house. Phillimore took it when the Baird's estate was finally settled and it became available to renters. It's a curious coincidence, Bunny. But then, all coincidences are curious. To man, that is. Nature is indifferent. Yes, I know I stated before that his eyes were blue, and so they were. I've been criticized for saying in one story that his eyes were blue, and in another that they were gray, but he has, as any idiot should have guessed, gray-blue eyes, which are one color in one light and another in another. Wow, okay, just editorial, just putting in complaints to your own writing in the middle of the I don't know if that's actually the author complaining, or if it's, like, the character complaining. Like he's written, like, several stories about his relationship with this guy. That was in January 1895, Raffles said. We are in deep waters, Bunny. My investigations have unearthed no evidence that Mr. Phillimore existed before November 1894, until he took the lodgings in the East End. No one seems to have heard of or even seen him. He came out of nowhere, rented his third-story lodgings, a terrible place, Bunny, until January. Then he rented the house where the bad old Baird gave up the ghost. Since then, he's been living a quiet enough life, expecting the visits he makes once a month to the several East End fences. He has a cook and a housekeeper, but these do not live in with him. At this late hour, the train went no farther than Willesden Junction. We walked from there towards Kensal Rise. Once more, I was dependent on Raffles to lead me through unfamiliar country. However, this time the moon was up, and the country was not quite as open as it had been last time I was there. A number of cottages, a small villa, Some, only partially built, occupied the empty fields I had passed through that fateful night. We walked down a footpath between the woods and a field, and we came out on the tarred wood-block road that had been laid only 4 years before. It now had the curb that had been lacking then, but there was still only one pale lamppost across the road from the house. Before us rose the corner of a high wall with the moonlight shining on the broken glass on top of the wall. It also outlined the sharp spikes on top of the tall green gate. We slipped on our masks. As before, Raffles reached up and placed champagne corks on the spikes. He then put his covert coat over the corks. We slipped over quietly. Raffles removed the corks, and we stood by the wall in a bed of laurels. I admit I felt apprehensive, even more so than the last time. Old Baird's ghost seemed to hover about the place. The shadows were thicker than they should have been. I started towards the gravel path leading to the house, which was unlit. Raffles seized my coattails. "Quiet," he said. "I see somebody. Something. Anyway. In the bushes at the far end of the garden. Down there, at the angle of the wall." I could see nothing, but I trusted Raffles, whose eyesight was as keen as a... Oh, you can't say that. You can't say that. You can't say that. I trusted Raffles, whose eyesight was as keen as a red Indian's. I don't know if you can say that. We moved slowly along the wall, stopping frequently to peer into the darkness of the bushes at the angle of the wall. About 20 yards from it, I saw something shapeless move in the shrubbery. I was all for clearing out then, but Raffles fiercely whispered that we could not permit a competitor to scare us away. After a quick conference, we moved in very slowly, but surely, slightly more solid shadows in the shadow of the wall. In the few very long and perspiration-drenched minutes, the stranger fell with one blow from Raffles' fist upon his jaw. Raffles dragged the snoring man out from the bushes, so we could get a look at him by the moonlight. "What have we here, Bunny?" he said. "Those long curly locks, that high arching nose, that overly thick eyebrow, and the odor of expensive Parisian perfume. Don't you recognize him?" I had to confess that I did not. "What? That is the famous journalist and infamous duelist Isidora Parasano," he said. "Now tell me you have never heard of him, or her, as the case may be." "Of course," I said. "The reporter for the Daily Telegraph." "No more," Raffles said. "He's a freelancer now. But what the devil is he doing here?" "Do you suppose," I said slowly, "that he, too, is one thing by day and quite another by night?" "Perhaps," Raffles said, "but he may be here in his capacity of journalist. He's also heard things about Mr. James Phillimore. The devil take it, if the press is here, you may be sure that the Yard is not far behind." Mr. Persano's features curiously combined a rugged masculinity with an offensive effeminacy. And then I punched him in the face. Yeah, it took a long time to say that. It took a long time to say I punched him in the face. Mr. Persano's features curiously combined a rugged masculinity with an offensive effeminacy, yet the latter characteristic was not really his fault. His father, an Italian diplomat, had died before he was born. His English mother had longed for a girl, been bitterly disappointed when her only born was a boy, and, unhindered by a husband or conscience, had named him Isidora and raised him as a girl. Until he entered a public school, he wore dresses. Oh dear. Oh, we have a... Boy, I'm sure this character is going to be treated with so much respect. Oh boy. In school, his long hair and certain feminine actions made him the object of an especially vicious persecution by the boys. It was there that he developed his abilities to defend himself with his fists. When he became an adult, he lived on the continent for several years. During this time, he earned a reputation as a dangerous man to insult. It was said that he had wounded 6 men with sword or pistol. Okay, I wasn't expecting to see a character whose entire bit is like their mom raised them as a girl, and then like boys made fun of him, so he just... Yeah, exactly. She's a badass he/him lesbian. Exactly. That's how we're going to interpret this. Exactly. This is a badass he/him lesbian who will in fact cut you if you decide to be a fucking twat. It was said that he had wounded half a dozen men with sword or pistol. From the little bag in which he carried the tools of the trade, Raffles brought a length of rope and a gag. After tying and gagging Persano, Raffles went through his pockets. The only object that aroused his curiosity was a very large matchbox in an inner pocket of his cloak. Opening this, he brought out something that shone in the moonlight. "By all that's holy," he said, "it's one of the sapphires." "Is Persano a rich man?" I said. "He doesn't have to work for a living, Bunny, and since he hasn't been in his house yet, I assume he got this from a fence. I also assume that he put the sapphire in the matchbox because a pickpocket isn't as likely to steal a box of matches. As it was, I was about to ignore it. "Let's get out of here," I said, but he crouched staring down at the journalist with the occasional glance at the jewel. This, by the way, was only about a quarter of the size of a hen's egg. Presently, Persano stirred, and he moaned under the gag. Raffles whispered into his ear, and he nodded. Raffles, saying to me, "Caution him if he looks like he's going to yell," undid the gag. Persano, as requested, kept his voice low. He confessed that he had heard rumors from his underworld contacts about the precious stones. Having tracked down our fence, he had contrived easily enough to buy one of Mr. Phillimore's jewels. In fact, he said, it was the first one that Mr. Phillimore had brought into the fence. Curious, wondering where the stones had come from, since there were no reported thefts of these, he had come here to spy on Phillimore. "That's a great story here," he said, "but just what? I haven't the foggiest. However, I must warn you that—" His warning was not heeded. Both Raffles and I heard the low voices outside the gate and the scraping of shoes against gravel. "Hey, don't leave me tied up here, boys," Persano said. "I might have a little trouble explaining satisfactorily just what I'm doing here. And then there's the jewel." Raffles slipped the stone back into the matchbox and put it into Persano's pocket. If we were to be caught, we would not have the gem on us. He untied the journalist's wrists and ankles and said, "Good luck." A moment later, after throwing our coats over the broken glass, Raffles and I went over the rear rail. We ran crouching into a dense woods about 20 yards back of the house. At the other side, at some distance, was a newly built house and a newly laid road. A moment later, we saw Persano come over the wall. He ran by, not seeing us, and disappeared down the road, trailing a heavy cloud of perfume. "We must visit him at his quarters," said Raffles. He put his hand on my shoulder to warn me, but there was no need. I too had seen the three men come around the corner of the wall. One took a position at the angle of the wall. The other two stared towards the woods. We retreated as quietly as possible, since there was no train available at this late hour. We walked to Maida Vale and took a hansom from there to home. Raffles went to his rooms at the Albany, and I to mine on Mount Street. How much more of this do we have to go? Let's see. How long have we been going? About 2 hours? I'll keep going. Has anything happened yet? Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing I was starting to kind of hesitate, because we're kind of like... This is, it's like kind of like broken up into chunks. There's like a part 1, a part 2, a part 3, the Roman numerals in the middle of the page. And nothing has necessarily happened yet. So I'm wondering if I want to stop. I haven't done a read stream in a little while, and I did get quite a late start. So I'm wondering if I just want to make this like a short kind of story and a half kind of stream. I don't know if I have it in me to keep going. I think there's a reason why I usually start this a little earlier on in the night. I don't know. Anybody have any objections? Any objections if I wanted to bounce it? I think so. I think I'm going to bounce that one. Despite the fact that had some really wacky characters going on, I don't know, it was a little boring. I wasn't really feeling it. I wasn't feeling it. And boy, is this stream just never about actually finishing anything. We don't finish things anymore. We just kind of read and then just like goof on it for as long as we feel like doing it. Finishing is for losers. That is pretty much it. We just read stuff and we see what happens. We have a billion half-started books and more jokes. Yup. We're never finishing anything. All right. Well, yeah. All right. That's pretty much it then. Then we'll probably go ahead and just kind of like call it here. I will show this thing one more time just because I think it's very cool. I just got to find it real quick. Where is it? Where are you? There it is. Can I like... That's not what I did. No, stop it. Get out of that. That's not what I wanted. Oh, here we go. We'll just do this. Just a sec. Come on. I want to show chat my funny little thing. I demand computer. Computer. I demand that you produce the funny little thing. Wow, you just don't want to. You just don't want to show me the funny little thing, do you? You don't want to show me the funny little thing. I want to see the funny little thing. Bring up the funny little thing. Do it. Do it. Bring up the funny little thing. Why is this taking like 10,000 years to come up? Yeah, it's okay. I can't see it, so you can't see it yet either. Why is this taking so long? Oh my god. Okay, fine. What if I do this? Oh, you're a butthole, computer. You're just being an absolute butt snarf. Never mind. I'm not bringing up the funny little... No, the funny little thing is canceled. I canceled the funny little thing. Because it doesn't want to friggin' work. It's being very rude. Server execution failed. What are you talking about? I'm just trying to play a little... I want to play a little video. I just want to play it. Why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me at the end of my stream? I just want to show the funny little thing. Why are you doing this? Why is it like this? Alright, never mind. Whatever. Fuck it. Never mind. Funny little thing canceled. Okay, everybody go home. Everybody go home. It's fine. Whatever. Anyway, okay. So, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for coming. Everybody who came to listen to me do kind of just a very chill vibe late night Sherlock Holmes stream for some funny little Sherlock Holmes. I don't know when I'll stream again. I've been feeling kind of unfortunately, I've been like in and out of a creative burnout, and I'm not really sure what I'm doing lately. Like, there's a part of me that wants to do another whole like stream restructuring, but I don't really have the give a shit to start on it yet. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what I do. I'll do something. But I will try and at least get some streams back up again, because this is fun and it's enjoyable. It's a good time. So, okay, alright. Everybody have a good night. Everybody have a good little night. Everybody have a nice little night. Get yourself a treat. Watch something nice. And get some good sleeps. Okay, bye. 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 Bye.